some of them.
Cheers to you. Now, I promise this is 100% ice. Well, it ain't ice water no more. It's cold water. 100% H2O. I'm not an indulger of the spirits, not an indulger of the wines. I like to stay on my game, stay sharp, like Stacey Adams, stay sharp. But anyway, uh, I've been trying to record this episode for about a week now. And for some reason, it keeps not getting done. Life just keeps on happening. Games come up, kid stuff come up, work comes up, all of that stuff. And my schedule is already tight. And so I finally had the chance to sit down, gather my thoughts, get everything together. And I'm exhausted. As you can see, I still got on my work clothes, but I talked to my homeboy JG the other day, and I said to him, I said, yo, I'm going to bed early so I can wake up and record this episode. Well, I went to sleep. I typically go to bed around between 8 and 9 o'clock. So I went to sleep. I forgot to set my alarm, but I popped up at midnight anyway, came downstairs to the studio, sat down, began to write. Fell asleep at the table, this table right here. Fell asleep, wake back up at 3 a.m. And by that time, it's time to get ready for work. So had to start the day again, didn't get a chance to record the episode, went through my long, exhausting work day, come back home. I'm sitting here now trying to get this knocked out, or at least get my thoughts knocked out. But today when I came home, everything was quiet. Like, I walked in the house, the dog wasn't barking. My daughter didn't run to me as soon as I walked into the door. I didn't hear my sons playing the video games, none of that stuff. My wife was in the bed, and I was like, what the heck is going on? So I had to go upstairs and just listen, and everything was still. And I realized this is the moment. This is my moment. So I hurried up. I set everything up, set up the mic, did my sound checks, all that stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure my wife put our daughter to bed knowing that I needed to record this episode. So with that said, cheers to you, bae. I'm gonna sip this H2O and give you a cheers. I appreciate you. It's like, no, I'm really thirsty. I'm sorry for people who's listening to this and not watching this online. But if you're listening to this, I apologize for slurping in your ear. I can't stand that. But anyway, I say all of that to say that this leads me to what I want to talk about today. So I want to talk about the reality of a romantic relationship. I've noticed that reality tends to offend people's fantasy of things. So I'm going to just tell you up front, I'm not coming into this episode angry. I'm not coming into this episode bitter about anything. Nobody hurt me. I don't want to hear, oh, who hurt you? Da 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 da. Right? Right. I'm actually pretty chill right now. I'm a bit tired, but other than that, I mean, I'm chill. I'm good. This is just what I want to say. This is just, as my old college professor used to say, this is a low level look, meaning a closer look at the dynamics of a romantic relationship. Because typically, when we look at things from a high level, we can't really see the details, all of the little intricacies and things that make relationships do what they do. So we're going to do a low level look. So we're going to get a little closer. Because I believe that some ideas sound good. I believe that some ideas feel good. Some ideas are great for movies, they're great for song lyrics, they're great for quotes. But what they aren't good for is surviving real life or living real life. And the myth I want to challenge today is the idea that unconditional love inside of a romantic relationship exists. People throw around the phrase unconditional love like it's supposed to come standard with every romantic relationship. Like, hey, yo, so this is what I want you to do, right? I need a nice body, good complex, great sense of humor, a little bit of intellect, and let me get that unconditional love package. Is that standard or do I got to pay extra for that? If love is real, then it shouldn't have expectations. It shouldn't have requirements or it shouldn't have boundaries. I'm telling you, maybe I'm the first person to tell you this, but that ain't love. That ain't nothing but fantasy. That whole thing, that whole idea of no boundaries, no requirements, no expectations, that's fantasy. I believe that most the most loving thing that you can do for somebody is tell them the truth. And so that's what this whole episode is about. So if what I'm saying to you right now makes you a little uncomfortable, or what you're about to hear makes you a little uncomfortable, then good. You're welcome. That means that we're tapping into something that's real. Depending on how you look at it, that's a good thing. So last week, I asked y'all two questions across my social media. Those two questions were: does unconditional love exist within a romantic relationship? A follow-up to that is, if you are currently in a relationship, or if you were in a serious relationship being boyfriend and girlfriend, or a marriage, husband and wife, do you love that person unconditionally? Or did you love that person unconditionally if you're no longer in that relationship? Does unconditional love exist within a romantic relationship? And do you love your insignificant other, or do you love your significant other unconditionally? And then I asked you to explain. So let's take a look at some of the responses I received. And of course, if you're listening to this on audio version, I will read the text aloud. So Dab from TikTok. And I actually appreciate Dab's response, because it's probably one of the strongest arguments people can make. So Dab said, we're supposed to love our wife like Christ loved the church and was willing to lay down his life. That's real, that's sacrificial, that's something serious, right? But here's the distinction that I want people to understand. That's not romance. That's covenant. There's a difference there. Christ didn't fall in love with the church. That wasn't butterflies that Christ was feeling. That wasn't dating that Christ was doing. That wasn't emotional chemistry that was happening. Okay? When I say covenant, that was duty, that was mission, that was sacrifice. So when Dab says that, or when Dab says it doesn't get any more unconditional than that, I agree with the principle of what he's saying, but That's not the way most people are using the word unconditional these days. Most people, when they say unconditional love and when they say the word unconditional, they mean I should be loved no matter what I do. They mean I should be chosen no matter what I become. They mean I should be desired even if I stop showing up for you. And that's not biblical. Even Christ's love comes with a response. Even Christ's love comes with a response. There's grace, yes, but there's also repentance. There's also obedience. Some type of there's also some type of transformation that happens within there as well. So what Dab is describing is the highest form of committed love, which we'll talk about a little later. But it's the highest form of committed love, but still it operates within a structure. It operates inside of some type of responsibility. It operates inside of roles, 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 right? And that's not romance without condition. That's covenant with weight. And what I mean by that is that's love that has consequences. That's love that costs something. That's love that ain't just a vibe, but it's a responsibility, and it's a responsibility to and for something that's bigger than yourself. And that's actually the whole point of what I'm making. So, Dab on TikTok, I appreciate you. Thank you. The next one comes from TikTok as well, and it was uh, a woman by the name of Peaches Teaches. And this response was, let me see it. Yeah, this response was very telling, and I respect her honesty in it. So she says, yes, unconditional love is possible. It's not automatic, but it's possible. And then she says something that I believe is the key to this whole thing. She says, this is the first time I've loved a man unconditionally. My first marriage was doomed because I couldn't, or because I couldn't. I believe her. I believe everything that she's saying right now. Her first marriage was doomed because she couldn't love the man unconditionally. However, I want you to realize something that she admitted without even realizing that she admitted it. So Peaches Teaches said she walked away from her first marriage because she couldn't love him the way that he wanted to be loved. And he wasn't comfortable with that. So I'm going to ask you a question. What does that mean? To me, that means that love in practice had a boundary. Love in practice had a requirement. Love in practice had a condition. Because if love was truly unconditional, then the marriage wouldn't have ended over some type of discomfort. The marriage wouldn't have ended over some type of unmet emotional need. But it did. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. What I am saying is that it's reality. Then, then she went on to say, everyone deserves to be loved the way they want to. Let me read that again. Everyone deserves to be loved the way they want to. I agree. I agree with the heart behind what she's saying. However, that statement alone proves my point yet again. Because the moment you say the way they want to. You're talking about expectations. You're talking about standards. You're talking about, say it, it's the word of the day, conditions. Yes. And love isn't just feelings floating in the air, right? Love is action. Love is action. Love is action. So if love is action, it's experienced through behavior, it's experienced through consistency, sacrifice, it's experienced through respect. So what Peaches teaches is when she's talking about or what she's calling unconditional love, I think is actual mature love. It's love that's chosen. It's love that's on purpose. It's love that's intentional. But even chosen love still operates within a certain framework of some type of mutual effort between both parties. Because let's be honest, people don't just walk away from a relationship, right? That exists within a unconditional framework. They walk away from a relationship when conditions are no longer being met. The next one comes from my man Mark Ball. Mark Ball has been rocking with me for, I think I got back online in when did I get back online? August, I believe, August of last year. And since I've gotten back online, Mark Ball has been engaging with my content pretty consistently. And for that, I appreciate you, Mark. I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you. And I hope that you continue to rock with me, man, because I need people like you. Um, you're one of the day ones, man. So thank you. I appreciate that. Mark said, let me bring this back up. So Mark says, I believe unconditional love exists in a romantic relationship, but that hasn't been my experience. I'm gonna read that again. He said, I believe that unconditional love exists within romantic relationships, but that hasn't been my experience. And Mark, I appreciate that level of honesty because I think that most people have that same experience. I believe that most people live exactly where you live. A lot of people believe that unconditional love, or a lot of people believe in unconditional love the same way they believe in the idea of a perfect world. They believe in it because it sounds right. They believe in it because it feels like it should be true. They believe in it because the concept of it all, let's be real, it seems beautiful, right? But then as you as you live long enough, as you date long enough, as you marry long enough or have been married long enough, and you begin to realize things, you begin to realize something, you begin to realize that reality doesn't operate like that because experience is typically our proving ground. You're going to learn everything you need to know through experience. Experience is where theories typically go to die. And Mark is basically saying, I want to believe it exists, but I've never actually seen it in practice. And again, that's the point that I'm making in this episode is that unconditional love is an ideal. Unconditional love is hope, but romantic relationships are built in the real world with real people, with real expectations and real boundaries and real needs and real responsibilities. It's not just an ideal. So when your belief and your experience don't match, that's not because you're being cynical. That's not because you're being anything but attentive to what's going on. And the goal isn't to become bitter. The goal is to replace that fantasy with structure, not unconditionality, but with covenant, not vibes, but with responsibility. So I got another one. I think we got what, two more? Yeah, we got two more. This next one comes from Carlene from I believe Carlene is from TikTok as well. And Carlene says, yes, I did have unconditional love for him. And I believe her. I believe she believes that she had unconditional love for him. But this is where I think that we need to slow down and ask a deeper question, right? That deeper question is, what do we mean when we say that? I was always taught to ask your questions. So, what do we mean when we say that? Because most people feel unconditional love in moments, in spurts. And you can feel it when you're deeply attached to someone. You can feel it when you're being loyal to someone and they're being loyal back. But whenever you've been through something, whenever you've been through something with that person, and you feel like you would do anything for that person, but the real test of unconditional love ain't how strong your feelings are for someone. It's whether it remains the same no matter what's happening, whether it remains the same no matter what's going on. Because if, let's say, that man becomes abusive, or if he stops providing, or if he betrayed you in any way, or if he disrespected you in any way, or if he chose to abandon the relationship altogether, right? Let's say he did that. Would that love still remain unchanged? Would that love remain unchanged? If your answer is no, and I believe that for most people it's going to be no, then what you're describing is an unconditional love. It's deep love, it's committed love, right? It's sacrificial love, but it still has lines. It still has limits. And it doesn't make what you're experiencing fake. It actually makes what you're experiencing very real, because unconditional love in its purest sense is almost divine. Josh, this next one is from Josh. So I'm laughing because Josh and I go back to Josh and I went to high school together. I can't remember if we went to middle school. I don't think we went to middle school together, but we definitely went to high school together. And we were actually supposed to connect last year for an interview. We haven't seen each other in, man, it's been years, probably over a decade. And we were supposed to connect last year for an interview, but situations happened and we weren't able to link up. So he too is another one of those day one supporters of the content, supporters of the message, supporters of the Some of Them movement that's in progress. And so, Josh, thank you for responding to the question. So, Josh says, let me bring this up. Josh says, only if people love themselves going into the relationship. Otherwise, it's impossible to love another individual at all if you don't love yourself first. The idea that self hatred can distort how you show up in your relationship. If you don't value yourself, then you may become insecure, you may become needy, you may become self destructive. I believe that part of that is true. But I want to push back on the language, on the absolute language, just a bit when you say the word impossible. And the way it's wrote or the way it's written, you emphasize it with capitalization. So that's what even brought my attention to it in the first place. Because if that were true, then nobody would ever be able to love while they're still healing. Nobody would ever be able to love while they're still growing. Nobody would ever be able to love while they're still figuring themselves out. But that's not the reality that we live in. See, some of the most loving people, I believe, are people who have perfect or imperfect self love. They have had trauma, they have had scars, they have had insecurities exploited, but they still show up though. They still sacrifice, they still care for people deeply. So I believe that a better way to say this is if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, it becomes harder to love someone well. I don't believe it becomes impossible. It just becomes more difficult. It becomes harder. Like I said, love is an action. Love is responsibility. Love is choosing to show up even when you're imperfect, even when you're tired, even when you're going through things. And honestly, most people don't enter into relationships fully whole anyway. Marriage is often part of the process that matures you. I know it sure matured me. So Josh is pointing at something that's real, something that because that internal stability matters, but love isn't reserved only for people who are fully healed. With that said, if I'm talking about the optimal way to go into a relationship, yes, fully heal. But love isn't just reserved for people who are fully healed. The last one I want to go into comes from one of my close friends, my man Foster Lou. So Foster Lou said that no, he said that the premise is romantic, and romance is the condition which I'm being loved. And that's bars right there. That's bars because what he's pointing out is something that people don't want to admit. Foster is pointing out that the word romantic already implies a condition. Romance isn't paternal love. Romance isn't divine love. Romance isn't love in the abstract, right? Romance is love that's tied to attraction. Romance is love that's tied to desire. Romance is love that's tied to intimacy. Romance is also love that's tied to exclusivity, right? It's tied to mutual choosing. Both of you wake up every day and you choose each other. So the moment you put the word romantic in front of love, you've already narrowed everything down. So romantic love is not just, I care about you as a person. Romantic love is, I want you. Romantic love is, I choose you. Romantic love is, I'm building and I want you to build with me. And those things typically come with expectations. Not typically, they do come with expectations. Because romance doesn't survive without respect, which is big for guys. Romance doesn't survive without effort and faithfulness and contribution from both parties. Romance doesn't survive without some type of physical intimacy. Let's be real. And you both have to have a shared direction that's initiated by the guy. So when people say, is there unconditional love within romance? My friend's answer is basically romance itself is the condition. The relationship is conditional by definition. That doesn't make it anything less. That doesn't make it transactional. The only thing that it does make it is honesty. And I will take honesty over anything else any day of the week. All right. So after reading through all of these responses, this is where I sit if you haven't already figured it out. Within the confines of a romantic relationship, unconditional love does not exist. Within the confines of an romantic relationship, unconditional love does not exist. And I need people to hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that this is cynical. I'm not saying that this is anti-love. This is not me saying that marriage is hopeless or that commitment isn't real. I believe in love. I believe in sacrifice. I believe in covenant because I know all of them very well. But I also believe in precision. And I believe in being precise with my words. So whenever we throw around the phrase unconditional love and romance, what we really end up doing is creating a concept that sounds nice and it sounds like I want to do it and it sounds like a song lyric, but it doesn't really work in real life. And as I said before, romance or romantic relationships have boundaries, they have expectations and responsibilities and roles and standards. And that's what makes them all real. So if a relationship is unconditional, then I believe that relationship is essentially undefined. And undefined love is typically unhealthy. How many remember the rhyme Jack and Jill? For those of you who don't remember, it went like this, or it goes like this. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. We heard that rhyme as kids, and we thought nothing of it. But as adults, that rhyme can be used as an analogy for marriage. See, Jack and Jill went up the hill together, meaning they started the relationship with a shared mission, It was his vision, but their mission, a life, a future. And they're not just holding hands as they're walking up this hill, they're carrying something. Jack and Jill are carrying that pail of water. That pail of water represents intimacy. That pail of water represents their closeness, the emotional safety that they feel when they're with each other, right? That's the thing that both people need in order to feel connected. And that hill is life. It's bills, it's pressure, it's children, okay? It's work. It's all of the day-to-day things that happen within a relationship, within a marriage. It's trauma. It's time. It's the loss of loved ones, okay? And traveling uphill is work. It's a lot of work. But on the top of that hill is love. The hill is love. So now here's what happened. Jack falls down and broke his crown. So Jack broke, or Jack breaks. The thing about men is men break in quiet ways. He loses his edge. He loses his direction. He stops leading. He begins to cope instead of rebuilding and reconnecting with the foundation that he's already built. And that made the foundation that made Jack. And now that dude doesn't feel like first place anymore. So he comes home, and he comes home tired, and he comes home checked out. Maybe he gets a little bit lazy. He gains some weight. Maybe he gets addicted to the comfort. Maybe he's still physically present, but he's no longer there, and he's not helping to carry the weight anymore. And so Jill watches all of this happen. And at first, Jill is patient, and she's still calm, and she's holding it together. And at first, she's understanding. But I know we can agree that women have a shot clock of disappointment. They have a shot clock period, and the condition begins to form within her heart. And she says, I can't keep loving this man that I can't respect. Now, she might not say it like that, but that's exactly how she's feeling. And her attraction begins to change. Her admiration begins to fade, and she starts to pull back away from Jack emotionally. And now Jill ain't soft like she used to be. And now Jill ain't warm like she used to be. And now Jill becomes less, or wants to be less, intimate with Jack the way she used to be, because that pail of water that she's now carrying begins to get heavy. That shit is heavy. And she's like, I didn't sign up to carry this alone. And now Jack is beginning to notice. And Jack, he begins to feel resentment. And now that's a condition, because men just don't want to be loved. They want to be honored. And as long as we believe that what we do matters, we'll keep doing it. So Jack begins to think, hold on, I fell on hard times. So the moment that I struggle, and the moment that I'm not at my best, and the moment that I fall, Jill begins to get colder. Jill begins to stop wanting to have sex with me. Jill begins to stop wanting to be around me, and now she's punishing me for my vulnerability. She's punishing me for my weakness. So now Jack begins to withdraw. He begins to shut down. He becomes harder. He becomes colder. And now, because he doesn't care anymore, Jack couldn't care about nothing anymore because his vulnerability began to cost him. At least that's how he sees it. And now that pale begins slipping because intimacy cannot survive contempt. It just can't. It can't survive disappointment, and it can't survive resentment. It can't survive any of those things. And then to finish the nursery rhyme, it goes, Jill came tumbling after. So when Jack falls, Jill falls too. Not because Jill wanted to fall. Jill fell because that marriage, that relationship, that's a system. And when one role collapses, the whole structure begins to wobble, and the water begins to spill out, and the closeness begins to spill out, and the husband and wife duties, they begin to spill out, and the sex and the intimacy and the closeness and all of that begins to dry up, and the warmth begins to disappear, and that house that was once a home becomes tense, and those two people who still live together are not really together at all. And this is where unconditional love actually gets exposed, because people love saying, I would love you no matter what. But guess what? When real life happens, and real life will happen, real life asks, will you still love me if I stop providing? Will you still desire me if I lose my strength? Will you still respect me if I fall? Will you still say, stay soft if I disappoint you? And the honest answer is that romance, unfortunately, doesn't work like that. Romantic love is not unconditional. It's very much so conditional, and it's conditional on responsibility. It's conditional on effort. It's conditional on roles being carried by each party. Not perfectly. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just need to be consistent. That's it. Just be consistent. So no, nobody failed because they didn't love enough. They failed because nobody knew exactly what they were responsible for whenever the water began to fall out of the pail. And that's why unconditional love is a myth within romance, because intimacy is a pail of water. And somebody has to keep carrying that pail of water uphill. And I'm thirsty. So I come home and there is a book, or there's a package. And I order stuff from Amazon all the time. I forgot that I had ordered this book, or now I can see it, this book. Now, this is a book from a guy, I've never met him, but I used to work with his brother. And the author's name is Charles Kidd, and the book is titled Don't Take My Word for It. I haven't had a chance to actually read through the whole book, but I was skimming through it and I landed on chapter 9. And the title of chapter 9 is The Popcorn Era of Relationships: Why We Struggle to Stay. And I'll just read the first little paragraph. First paragraph says, in the past, relationships lasted longer, not because they were always perfect, but because people were more willing to work together or work through challenges. Today, with social media and dating apps, the idea of better options are in quotations, is always lingering, making commitment feel temporary rather than intentional. And that first sentence actually stuck out to me. That first sentence where it says, in the past, relationships lasted longer because people were willing to work through challenges. But today, well, that was it. It was just people were willing to work through challenges. So, where my mind typically goes with something like that, or when I read words like that, relationships lasted longer because people were willing to work through challenges. I begin to think about it a little deeper, and I want to know if you rocking with me. So the question that I ask is, why? Why were people willing to work through challenges in the past? Why? What was or what is Were they more loyalty? Were they more loyal? Were they more mature? Were they more committed to each other? Or was it because there were fewer options to choose from? I think the honest answer is it was a little bit of both. And one of the biggest differences between then and now is that back then, commitment was supported externally. Today, commitment is almost entirely internal. And I'll tell you what I mean by commitment being external and commitment being internal. So, historically, marriage wasn't just a private emotional relationship between two people, it was reinforced by society. Family expectations mattered. Community standards matter, religious convictions matter, divorce carried a stigma, and leaving wasn't that simple. So even when a couple hit hard times, right, there was these external forces that kept them together. The external forces said, work through it. External forces said, don't walk away. And commitment wasn't just based on how you felt. It was based on the structure that helped build and hold together your life. And we also got to be honest about the economic reality. For most of history, especially for women, leaving a marriage wasn't just emotionally difficult, it was also financially unrealistic. There was limited job opportunities for women. There was limited independence and sometimes limited legal rights. So some relationships lasted longer purely because a woman had to survive and it was more difficult to leave. And that's just the reality of it. There was also cultural pressure there. Divorce wasn't treated like some type of festive celebration or liberation like it is now, and people didn't always see it as an option. Families typically got involved in your marital business. Communities typically talked about it, and people partly stayed because of shame, and partly because of duty, and partly because that was just the normal society, but compared it to today where most of those external pressures are gone. Divorce is, I mean, they have divorce parties just like they have what was those bridesmaid parties and grooms parties and stuff like what they call bachelor parties. That's what they're called. So they typically have divorce parties now, and divorce is socially normalized. Men and women are financially independent, right? Men have always been financially independent, but women are now financially independent. The community doesn't enforce marriage the way that it used to. Religion also is another thing that isn't central for most people's lives. And on top of all of that, you have technology, right? And on top of all of that, you have technology. And what it's doing is it's created this constant illusion of alternatives. So you can sit next to your spouse on the couch and your phone and can still whisper, there might be something better. The grass might be greener on the other side. Guess what? It ain't. It ain't. The grass ain't ever green on the other side. So those dating apps, those social media comparison and all of that stuff like that, all of that stuff is lingering. So now commitment isn't about holding up the world around you. It's just whatever you feel inside, whatever your values are, whatever your discipline is, whatever your character is, right? So, whatever your ability is to do what's right or do what's fulfilling to you is what you're typically going to do. That's what I mean when I say that commitment today is internal. See, nobody is forcing you to stay. You're not staying because you don't have any other options or you don't have any other choices. You're staying because you've decided that vows mean something. You staying because you woke up and you decided that you choose her or you choose him, right? And that leads directly into the conversation about unconditional love. Unconditional love is only meaningful when leaving is possible. If somebody stays only because they're trapped economically or socially, that's not love, that's just constraint. But when someone stays in a world where walking away is so easy, right? When someone stays out of conviction, when someone stays out of loyalty, when someone stays out of covenant, that that is what actually means something. So I don't think that the takeaway is that people in the past, uh, um, people in the past, what do I want to say? I want to say, I don't think that the takeaway is that people in the past were automatically better at love and relationships. I think the takeaway is that modern relationships require more from a person intentionally because commitment is no longer forced upon you externally. It has to be chosen internally. And that's why unconditional love and real covenant love is actually harder today because nothing is holding you there except your word. So when we wonder why grandmom and grandpa stayed together for so long, right, through all of the bull crap that they went through, this is why. Because they had all of the external factors making them stay. Where now we just have internal factors, our word, our values, our discipline, our character. And you wake up every day and you choose that person. There's no, oh, always and forever. No, there's today and there's tomorrow. And when you wake up, you choose. That's really the reality of it. It sounds fucked up, but that's how it is. Look at Disney. Disney painted a very vivid picture of these fairy tales and the idea of happily ever after, but they lied. See, they told you that every little girl was a princess and that she would get her Prince Charming at the end. They told every little boy that if he performed chivalrous acts and gestures for a girl and to be subservient to her in order to win her over. Because I think a lot of this unconditional love conversation is downstream from stories that we were told as children. Disney didn't invent fantasy. Fantasy have been around long before Disney was even thought of. Fantasy has always been there. What Disney did was Disney monetized fantasy. They packaged it and they branded it. They made romance feel like the finish line instead of the beginning, instead of the foundation of it all. That's what Disney did. And because fantasy sells emotion, Disney sells the feeling of someday. It sells the moment, but it misses something. It doesn't sell longevity. It doesn't sell the boring parts. It doesn't sell the disagreements. It doesn't sell the weight, the full weight of it all. Think about it. Every story ends at the same exact place. It's going to be three things. Three things. It's going to be a kiss. It's going to be a wedding. There's going to be a happily ever after. And then the credits are going to roll right when the real relationship would actually begin. Let me tell you what you don't see. You never see the mortgage. You never see the postpartum depression. You never see the job loss. You never see the disagreements. You never see two people trying to figure things out after they've been together for 10 years. You don't see those parts because that part doesn't fit. That part doesn't fit into the fairy tale. That part doesn't fit into the fantasy. So you have entire generations that were raised on the idea that love is something you find. Let's say that again for the people in the back. Turn your radio up. Turn your TV up. Turn your ear pods up. All that. We have entire generations, okay, that were raised on the idea that love is something you find. Entire generations. And then on top of that, it's supposed to stay magical. But real love ain't magic. Real love requires maintenance. Real love requires defined roles. Real love requires sacrifice long after the vows are said. And I don't think that I think that this fantasy, right, is distorted both for men and for women, but in different ways. Women were taught to wait for a Prince Charming. She was taught to wait for this perfectly emotionally fluent, endless, affirming man who always knows just the right things to say. And men were taught to perform romance instead of build a solid foundation fit for family leadership. Men were taught to chase the script. Men were taught to pedestalize her. Men were taught to prove to her that he is worthy through constant chivalrous gestures instead of through stability, instead of through structure, instead of through hard work and experience, instead of through responsibility, instead of through discipline. So now we've got people entering marriages with expectations built on romantic comedies and Disney fantasies. Relationships are built on reality. And then when people get into these relationships, then they realize that unconditional love doesn't feel like the fairy tale because fairy tales end at the altar. Everything after that, that's when covenant begins. Some of you may be wondering, what do I mean when I say covenant? I mean this. I mean vows. I mean responsibility, not just feelings. I mean a covenant is like a binding commitment built on duty, responsibility, and vows, not just feelings. Romance is feelings. Romance is emotional. Romance is attraction. It's chemistry. It's excitement, right? I love how you make me feel right now. That's what romance is, right? Romance is real, okay? But it's also fragile. Romance rises and falls depending on what's going on. On the other hand, covenant is structural, okay? Covenant is like saying, I'm here even when it gets hard. I'm going to play my position even when it gets difficult. I made a vow, not a vibe. I understand what I'm supposed to be doing here and whatever is bigger than me in the mood that I'm in right now. Covenant is love, but it's coupled with the understanding that this thing ain't going to be easy, but it's going to happen because we're going to make it happen. Covenant is not unconditional the way that most people mean it today. People hear unconditional love and they think I should be loved no matter what I do, right? I should be accepted even when I stop trying. Um, I should be chosen even if I make things unsafe or I'm irresponsible. Nah, no, you shouldn't. However, covenant is, or what I mean by covenant is, I'm going to be faithful as long as we both honor what we agreed to build. That's why marriage vows have terms like responsibility, like fidelity, like protection, provision, respect, and mutual sacrifice, right? Those are conditions of a marriage within the vows. Covenant is love governed by order. A covenant says the relationship This is our relationship, and this relationship has a structure. We both have roles. We both have responsibilities. We both have accountability. Think about it like being in the military. I was in the military, so think about it like that. You don't stay because it's always fun, because anybody's in the military know it's not always fun. You stay because, one, it's honorable. However, two, you swore an oath. That's a covenant. Covenant is chosen. It's not felt. It's chosen. Romance, however, will say something like, I love you because I feel it. A covenant is going to say, I love you because I decide to. I love you because I vow to. I love you because I'm committed to you. I'm committed to us. I'm committed to our mission. I'm committed to our life together. And that's why covenants last 30, 40, 50 plus years. That's not sparks. That's not butterflies. That's not love languages, right? That's honor. That's duty. That's structure. That's covenant. And I believe that the best way to describe the difference between a covenant and romance is that romance is a feeling of love, and a covenant is the responsibility of love. In computer programming, there's something called an if statement. What it means is, if the condition is true, then the outcome, or then this outcome happens. That's it. Computers don't run on intentions. They don't run on emotions. They don't run on poetry. It literally runs on conditions. And the more and more I live life, the more I realize that relationships also run on conditions. But yet people love to say, oh man, my love is unconditional. Or if it's an R&B song, girl, you know my love is unconditional. But see, real life don't operate like R&B song lyrics. It operates on invisible if statements. Invisible if statements that nobody really wants to admit they are there. They are there. So let me read some of the code out loud to see if it makes sense to you. In a relationship, you'll see something like this. You'll see, if he stops providing, then she feels less secure. Okay? Now, if a man stops working, if a man stops building, if a man stops carrying his weight, then the relationship changes. But because security, or not but the relationship changes because security is a condition. A man's drive, his stability, his willingness to shoulder responsibility, all of that stuff matters. Every single piece of it matters. Number two, here we go. I got it. Number two, if she disrespects him and disrespects him consistently, he withdraws. else, or then he withdraws, else he invests more effort. Now, a man doesn't flourish in environments where he's constantly undermined. A man would give his life for a woman, but he would only give his life for a woman who honors him. But he will slowly disappear in a home that mocks him, because that respect ain't optional. That respect is a condition. It's another one. Let's be honest. If effort stops and attraction fades, then intimacy dies. If attraction stops and if effort stops and attraction fades, then intimacy dies. See, people want love to be some magical spell, but it's comfortable, right? It's very comfortable to believe that if you just find the one, then everything locks in and everything runs on autopilot and you can live like that forever. You don't need maintenance. You don't need effort. You just have this unbreakable chemistry, right? That keeps itself alive. All of that is bullshit and fantasy. Intimacy doesn't survive on feelings alone. You have to guard it. You have to work on it. Most people don't want to hear that, because admitting that love needs maintenance means that you're admitting that it has rules, not some manipulative games, not some weak automatives, just conditions. What happens when both people stop putting in effort? I'll tell you. Life starts lifing. Stress, it starts building. And then we typically get comfortable and we start acting like the bond is just there and the bond is going to be permanent and we don't need to feed that intimacy. Wrong. That action is still required, because love still needs to thrive. It still needs to flourish. Last one. And this one is important. If he's vulnerable and she uses it against him, then all trust is broken. The things that people love to say is love should be unconditional. They say it should be unconditional, but vulnerability exposes one of the clearest conditions that exist within relationships. Because a man will open up his chest, but it will only do it once. And I'm not talking about literally, I mean emotionally. But a man will open up his chest and he'll tell you what he's afraid of. He'll tell you where he feels inadequate. He'll tell you what keeps him up at night, and he'll even admit some of the things that he doesn't have answers for. Now, I don't advise you do that with your woman, but some guys will do that. And for a lot of men, that moment is not a casual moment. That moment costs them something. That moment is a risk for them. And so when a woman weaponizes that vulnerability, if he gets it thrown back in his face during an argument, or if it becomes ammo for some reason, or if it is something that's brought up whenever she's angry just to win, he'll never do it again. That's not because he's not emotionally intelligent. That's not because he's immature, but because he learned something very valuable. He learned that vulnerability, it ain't safe. And but you hear people say, "Oh, it's because he chose wrong. You just got to pick the right one." Well, guess what? Newsflash, there is no right one. There is no one person. This idea of the one or this idea of soulmate is a myth. It's made up. It's make believe. Fellas, don't be vulnerable to your wife, and especially don't be vulnerable to your girlfriend. She doesn't want to hear that, honestly. Whether she tells you she does or not, she's not designed to bear the weight that you carry on your shoulders. Save that conversation for your homeboys because they will understand the burden that you carry as a man. They understand the issues that you deal with as a man, and I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the guys who give you trash ass advice. You shouldn't be hanging around those kind of guys anyway. I'm talking about the guys who are in committed relationships or have the experience under their belt, more experience than you do. I'm talking about men. I'm not talking about adult males. I'm not talking about the guys who seek validation from women. I'm talking about men who are honorable, men who know who they are, men who understand this masculine burden of performance. I don't say burden in a bad way. I say burden to express exactly what it is I mean and to give you a vivid picture of how heavy it is the things that we bear. But these are the guys that you take advice from. These are the guys that you are vulnerable with. These are the guys that you build your circle around, or these are the guys that you become a part of their circle. That's brotherhood, and that's a vital part to your becoming a man. So, say you have a relationship with two emotionally driven people, things get heated. Typically, the one who's physically stronger will prevail, right? So think about it. Your girl, your wife, she's going to lead with her emotions, okay? They'll get the best of her and they'll get the best of her most of the time. However, you can't afford to lead with your emotions. You can't afford for your emotions to get the best of you because unfortunately, that's how the cops get called. Unfortunately, that's how you get sent to jail. Unfortunately, that's how you get them in domestic violence charges. And unfortunately, that's how people get physically hurt. So it's your duty, it's my duty, it's our duty as men to understand that before you invite a woman to become a part of your life, you must first have a strong understanding of how we operate, men and women, how we operate optimally together. And as the head of household, I am to remain rational and to not react to situations, but to respond to situations and respond accordingly to the intensity of the situation, meaning that some responses are immediate, but some responses are no responses at all. But fellas, see, it's our job to understand how she works. It's our job to understand how she operates. It's our job to understand how we work. It's our job to understand how we operate. And then we need to figure out, or we don't need to figure out because the information's out there. We need to understand how we work best together. That's leadership in a nutshell. So back to what I was saying though, once his emotional safety, for lack of a better term, once his emotional safety is broken, the relationship will drastically change. Because vulnerability is not unconditional. It's offered under a certain condition. And that condition is, will you protect what I show you, or will you punish me for it? So if a guy retreats, if a guy stops talking, it's not always because he doesn't have feelings. It's because he shared them once and it costs him something. And so when people talk about unconditional love, this is what I mean. Vulnerability is a condition. Respect is a condition. Trust is also a condition. And pretending that those conditions don't exist doesn't make you romantic. It makes you unrealistic. I'm going to leave you with this. Men don't need a woman to be our therapist. Okay? Men don't need a woman to be their therapist. They need a woman to be a peaceful place. So when you look at love and romance, it's not unconditional, not in the way that people believe it is. Love is action. As I said before, love is agreement. Love is roles. Love is consistency over time. It's two people carrying weight together, Jack and Jill. But it's not just two people chasing feelings. That relationship that you're in will eventually collapse without defined roles, because feelings alone can't hold up a marriage. And the goal ain't to feed a fantasy. The goal is real. The goal is that real, long-lasting love is defined. Real, long-lasting love is protected. And real, long-lasting love is lived out with intention. Because unconditional love is nothing but a story. But that covenant love is real. And real life will always win. Every time. If you would like to become a featured guest on the Some of Them podcast, go to www.someofthem.com.